What do you do when your brand is on fire? Today we sit down with Seamus Bradley, award-winning media strategist, crisis comms expert, and lecturer of journalism at Swinburne. He spent decades managing reputational risk, handling high-stakes messaging, and navigating media storms. From government scandals to brand-saving headlines, let's break down what it really takes to lead with clarity when the pressure is high and the stakes even higher. What was it that made you think of journalism as something that was your calling in the first place?
I'm from Ireland, and everybody in Ireland at one point and still wanted to be a writer.
Looking at crisis, when trouble comes knocking,
Yeah.
there's always some things that are done
Yes.
versus some things that should be done.
Right.
Tell us a bit more about what does your world look like?
So when a crisis comes knocking and you're not prepared, then you're going to get knocked over. Our advice to any company is to sit down either with your computer or your tablet or a piece of paper and work out what are the 5 scariest things that can happen for you in your company. What are they? Culture is a really difficult one. So and nearly every company has a mission and vision and all that kind of stuff, and it's all written down. And how seriously do people take it? They take it as seriously as the person at the top of the ladder takes it. The critical thing is to actually realize that something can go wrong, that your worst nightmare, your CEO having an affair with the head of HR, your worst nightmare can happen, and it can damage your company, it can damage your brand, it can damage your sales, it can damage the bottom line, it can make shareholders want to quit the company and so on. So you need to have a plan that prepares for that.
So let's look at something which has happened very recently. We all know about the Optus fiasco.
Yes.
And I believe this is the second time that Optus is in the spotlight in recent years.
Recent years, that's right, in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any thoughts around that?
I think it's...
Hi Seamus, welcome to Cask Convos, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Shorvani.
Seamus, crisis communications, it's a very niche field. And we would love to know, how it all started for you. What made you come into this?
Right. So my background is in journalism. For your listenership and viewership, I'm a former news editor at The Age, which gave me a view of the crisis from the other end. I've also worked at the Daily Star, I've worked at the Evening Herald, I've worked at the Sun, the Herald Sun here. So I've worked at quite a lot of newspapers, and I've done a little bit of TV and so on as well over the years. So I've seen the crisis from the other end, where the crisis is occurring and we're trying to, from a journalistic point of view, trying to figure out what actually happened. How can we figure how, is it newsworthy? What do we do about it? Who do we interview? What is the company saying? All that kind of stuff. So from one end to the other end, it's not that far of a leap actually, because it's, I love crisis. I mean, it's one of those things that you either like and thrive in, or it just scares you and you run away from. I actually quite like a crisis because it gives me that adrenaline rush, and I know what the journalist is going to ask. I know what they're looking for. I know what they need. I know, how a company can protect themselves. So it's really kind of a natural progression, if you like. Yeah.
And what was it that made you think of journalism as something that was your calling in the first place?
I'm from Ireland, and everybody in Ireland at one point and still wanted to be a writer. So I wanted to make my living out of writing if at all possible. And as a teenager, I decided I wanted to be a journalist. I don't even remember the genesis of that, but it was very, very young. I wanted to be a journalist, and as people who declare at a very young age that they want to be something, there's always somebody to tell you that you can't do it, which for me just made me more determined. So I got into journalism college in Dublin. Everybody said I couldn't do it. I did it. Then they said there are no jobs. I got a job. So sort of kept going from there. And journalism is one of those adrenaline rushes. It's just sort of, you get to meet people. You get, as you are doing now, you get to ask people whatever you want. You can ask any question, and you're always getting new information and filtering it and wondering about it. And is it useful? Is it a story? Is the audience interested? So you're acting on behalf of an audience as well, which I find quite interesting.
And looking at crisis, when trouble comes knocking,
Yeah.
there's always some things that are done
Yes.
versus some things that should be done.
Right.
Tell us a bit more about what does your world look like?
So when a crisis comes knocking and you're not prepared, then you're going to get knocked over. So the issue around the crisis is to be prepared for a crisis. It doesn't have to be particularly the crisis that is occurring. It can be another crisis. So our advice to any company is to sit down either with your computer or your tablet or piece of paper and work out what are the 5 scariest things that can happen for you in your company. What are they? Could it possibly be your technology falling over and somebody dying? That could be the worst thing. Like somebody actually dies as a consequence of something you've done or not done. So you work back from there. What are the worst things that can happen? And then you plan around that. So the planning would be around key messaging for the one part, but that's actually a little bit further on. You actually need your staff to be on board, to understand that there are dangers in the world and that they're part of your early warning system, right? So you see a lot of the time that management, if depending on the size of the company, lives in a rarefied atmosphere, very high up, right, in the hierarchy. People don't like to tell the CEO things that are maybe unpleasant. So there might be a thing where people are too scared to tell the CEO that something is going on, so they wait. I really, really want to be sure that that thing I think is really bad is actually really bad before I go in and tell the CEO, whoever he or she may be. So you need to have an early warning system. Staff are part of that, a very, very key part of that, and you need to be told fast.
That's an interesting point you've raised around, people hesitating from telling the CEO or the senior leadership about things possibly going wrong, those indicators.
Yeah.
Do you think it kind of ties back to company culture? And would you say that if there is better culture, companies might have better ways to respond to a crisis, or?
Yeah, so culture is a really difficult one. So, and nearly every company has a mission and vision and all that kind of stuff. And it's all written down, and how seriously do people take it? They take it as seriously as the person at the top of the ladder takes it. So, it's the old adage of a fish rotting from the head down. So if the head of the company is serious, takes it seriously, not just talks about it, but actually walks the walk, it's infused right through the company. So culture comes from the top down and also from the bottom up. So it's a complex one, but culture is a key part of it. You've got to be open enough to be able to hear things that you actually don't really want to hear.
So let's look at something which has happened very recently. We all know about the Optus fiasco.
Yes.
And I believe this is the second time that Optus is in the spotlight in recent years.
Recent years, that's right, in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any thoughts around that?
I think it's as you said earlier, I think it's cultural but structural as well. So, and I'm coming from the outside. So as a former journalist and communications person, I think you can diagnose quite a lot of what's happening inside the company through their communications. You can kind of see. Many, many years ago, Optus in Victoria was number 3 in the market, right? Number 3 in the market in Victoria. It was number 2 across Australia. This is going back about a decade. At that particular point, Vodafone was number 2 in Victoria and number 3 right across Australia. But the towers in Victoria were always sort of failing. There was a large failure rate in the towers in Victoria. And I think maybe nationwide as well. So they were going through a crisis of their own. But Optus was number 3 here behind a company whose towers weren't working all the time.
Okay.
Right. So you can kind of say Optus has some sort of historical, either cultural or structural issue that goes far beyond the current management. By the way it looks from the outside looking in. And that's all you can say. You can say, whenever Optus was called for a quote about something that was happening in Victoria, they missed the deadline. So they didn't have, there was no share of voice in their stories down here at that particular point, and whereas they were in Sydney. So it's probably that they were Sydney-centric, and then of course, because they're owned by Singtel, it was Singapore-centric as well. So it might be that the structure here might be more orientated towards sales, rather than, they don't have the full suite of everything that they need for this market here, and certainly it looks like maybe not for WA and South Australia and elsewhere as well, if the current crisis is anything to go by, looking from the outside.
Okay, and you wouldn't really anytime anticipate that a normal technical outage would actually result in people dying. So that's a very hard crisis to manage for an organization.
Yeah.
What do you think? They did some things well in managing it, or some things they did not do well. Any thoughts around that?
Right. I think that the fact that the police had to ring them and tell them that the 000 was out indicates something wrong. I mean, it's obviously police and customers ringing saying 000 is out indicates something seriously wrong. So it could be, there are 3 investigations going on at the moment. Hopefully they'll get to the bottom of it. Hopefully those investigations will include looking at the structure and the culture and technical aspects as well. But it took them too long. It took far too long. When the police are telling you that your service isn't working, that's very serious.
Yeah.
It's really very serious.
And that probably brings us back to having a good crisis management plan. Can you tell us what are certain aspects of a crisis management plan that are critical for a company to have?
Yeah. So the critical thing is to actually realize that something can go wrong. That your worst nightmare, your CEO having an affair with the head of HR, your worst nightmare can happen, and it can damage your company, it can damage your brand, it can damage your sales, it can damage the bottom line, it can make shareholders, want to quit the company and so on. So you need to have a plan that prepares for that. How do you quickly act and react in those circumstances to preserve the reputation, preserve the company, preserve the jobs? Because, perhaps hundreds of people's jobs are depending on how you react in those first moments, and how do you do that? So if you have a plan in place, the plan recognizes that anything can go wrong. Your worst nightmare is if it's not likely, it's possible. You've got to recognize that it's possible, and then rank that. So you rank things. You go, here are the 5 things that can go wrong for us. These are the ones we're really scared of. We have planning for them. We've got our messaging. We've got our people in place. But you also then need a team. So you need a team, a crisis communication team, have that set up. Each of their roles are very well defined, and when a crisis occurs, you need to then insulate them from regular everyday business. So you can have somebody who's on your crisis communications team answering the phone and trying to make a sale at the same time.
True.
You've got to just isolate them. They've got to concentrate down really, really hard, work through this thing. Because when the crisis occurs, in the first moments of it, maybe for the first hour, you actually don't know what it is. It's very confusing. Things are going wrong, people are phoning up, there's angry people on the phone, you're getting angry emails, social media is going off, the reporters are calling you. You're not sure what's going on. So you need to sort of get a handle of what's going on, but also present in a confident manner to the public. So there's various ways of doing that. At the point where you know something has gone wrong and it's serious, you organize, say, a stand-up media thing and live stream it or do whatever you're going to do with it and say, we have an issue, the issue appears to be this, we're working behind the scenes, we've alerted the police, we've alerted, whoever you need to alert, we're talking to the regulatory authorities and everything else, and we'll update you more in an hour. So you kind of take control of the narrative, if you like, because if you're not in control, somebody else is. Somebody else is going to fill that gap. Because media and social media, they need the beasts. They need to be fed. You've got to keep them fed. So you've got to, if you're not doing it, somebody else will, and you'll lose control of your narrative, which is a really, really, then you're in a sort of a crisis within a crisis.
And it's funny that you mentioned about the CEO having an affair with the head of HR. We all know about Coldplay Gate.
Yes.
And couple of things which really stood out for me from all of that happened. One was, this is something which is so out of the blue. Like, you are usually, as an organization, you're looking at what things can go wrong within your day-to-day functioning as an organization.
Yeah.
They would have probably not imagined, somebody getting caught in the middle of a concert, in the middle of nowhere. That was one. So how do you really plan for what you haven't planned for?
Right.
That was one.
Yeah.
And the second thing which really stood out for me throughout this crisis was the amount of floating information, false information. We saw statements by the CEO, supposedly by the CEO from his wife, and so on, by the company as well, and all of them were false.
Yeah.
So you didn't know what to believe in, what not to believe in, because social media was just all over the place.
Yeah.
So let's take the first one first. How do you plan for what you haven't planned for?
The fact that you have a plan is the key thing. And you by planning for, say, those 5 things, by planning for those 5 things, those worst nightmare things, scenarios, your awareness of them is risen, like, to an extent where you kind of go, wow, this could knock our company out, right? We have planned for them, we've got our messaging, we've got our communications team in place. So you've got all of that, all of those assets sitting behind it, and then you're hit out of the blue by something else. Like, your CEO and head of HR goes to a concert and whoops, and then they dive for cover. So you're hit by that, but you have done all this other work, which doesn't pertain exactly to this situation, but you can draw on all that work to help manage that situation. Now, social media, there are a lot of clever people on social media, and they are very, very motivated and very fast, and they can make a joke out of almost anything, and they do. So that's part of now. And with AI, of course, they can turn it into anything, right? So you need to be aware of that. So you've got your monitoring in place. So hopefully, if you're a large enough company, you've got monitoring for every mention of you in social and in regular media, so that you know what's happening out there. You're able to rebut it pretty quickly because you've got your own emergency communications team in place, and they're able to act as a rebuttal to that. You're using mainstream media as a filter. So, like, you're able to correct the record through mainstream media as well. Because you're doing things correctly, and because you have a plan, and because you are prepared, this thing that's just come from nowhere, you can manage in a logical and progressive manner. It doesn't mean that you don't panic. It doesn't mean that you just sometimes don't know what's going on, but it does mean that you have a structure to follow. But be careful about the structures that you follow, though.
And have you ever had or encountered an incident where you can see a crisis happening, and to the same crisis, 2 different responses had different outcomes?
Not really, because you only really get one shot at these things. And I've been around newsrooms for so long, I can tell pretty much the questions that are going to be asked and what the journalists are looking for. So when a client comes to me, as they have done in the past, with something that's emerging and like is actually pretty much happening now on social media, you can very quickly put in place all that messaging and a strategy around how to manage it. So what you really, really want to do is, if you're having a crisis, and if nobody has died, right? So but it can still damage your company. You get on the front foot with that, like as quickly as you can, and make it as boring as you can. You try to make everything as boring as possible.
Interesting. And how do you make things boring?
Process, right? So you say, for instance, one of our high-level staff members has gone off and done this strange thing. It's on X and it's trending. You put a process around that. So you say, we're aware of it. Call in your lawyers, call in HR, call in that person. Turn it into a legal process. Isolate it from the rest of the company, and handle it really, really well and delicately. So you've got multiple things going on. You've got a legal process, you've got communications process, you've got an HR process, you've got internal communications process all going on at the same time, which are handling what could be very explosive situation, you're basically putting a safety rails around it as much as you can. Doesn't work all the time, but it should work for most people.
Okay. And how do you deal with some of those negative sentiments which keep coming out of the media or from social networks? What do you respond to them or don't respond to them at all? What's the best?
So it depends on the context. I mean, if you've got, we've often seen, especially in the early days of social media, where somebody is highly motivated and angry about something. Do you respond or not? I mean, it's a case-by-case situation, because you can feed the beast, right? Like somebody will ask a highly technical question, your highly technical internal person will get back, give them highly technical answers, which leads to more questions, which leads to more answers, and you've got a staff member basically dealing with, something that's taken away from the business. So it's a case-by-case scenario. Oftentimes these crises, they sort of come up, and if you can manage to sort of make it boring, they'll pop back down again, and you can manage it internally without external viewership, but not always. But so yeah, it is kind of situational, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's take a step into the future. Things are changing very rapidly now. And the speed of communication is going phenomenal every day.
Yeah.
So what do you think will happen in, say, 5 years, 10 years from now? And I'm sure it's going to increasingly get difficult to manage these kind of communications. So
Yes.
how do you stay ahead?
So you stay ahead by planning. The only way is to plan for these things as much as possible and be prepared and have people. I think it's been really, really interesting over the last, say, 10 years or something. The awareness of media has increased. The awareness of social media, how it operates, has increased. We all now know that it's based on algorithms, and it's sort of, it's seeking your attention. So we try to, you plan for it, you prepare for it, you're ready for it. And then if something else occurs, you still have all those plans and preparations in place. It will get faster. AI will crank it up. We will actually see videos of what appear to be real people in real situations doing extraordinarily stupid things. A lot of it will be fake, and occasionally there will be a real one. So it's the awareness thing. And the AI is like an arms race now. Some technology is invented that's destructive. Somebody else invents something that neutralizes it a bit or can recognize it, and it'll just keep going. So I think that it's going to get more difficult, but doesn't mean it's going to be impossible. But most companies will be left alone. Like most companies will be fine. I mean, I think Microsoft and Apple will always be targets, but somebody operating at a lower level, just going about their business, won't be. So when they do have a crisis, it is actually a real crisis for the most part.
I have one last question, and this is a bit of an outlier, but has any organization ever benefited from a crisis happening?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I want some
there's
names,
more than,
if you can.
There's actually more than one. And it has to do with how they actually handle the crisis.
Okay.
And then not just how they handled the crisis, but how they communicated how they were handling the crisis. So in, I think it was about 1982, there was an incident in the United States where somebody poisoned Tylenol tablets, paracetamol tablets, Tylenol brand.
Oh, wow.
Depending on which source you look at, 6 to 7 people died. Definitely 6, possibly 7. Okay. Definitely 6 died. And Tylenol was, like it was a crisis point for them. The brand was being attacked. People were dying from consuming their product. It could have ended the company. It was Johnson & Johnson company. It could have ended that brand entirely. So what Tylenol did was they withdrew every packet of Tylenol in the US from the shelves. Cost them millions upon millions and millions of dollars. Withdrew them immediately. Nationwide recall. And then what they did was they went about inventing the safety for the packets so that they couldn't be interfered with. And then they relaunched it. And then it was seen as the safest painkiller brand in the United States, and their sales went up, and they're still very, very well trusted. It's just loads of cases like that where people do the right thing, do it really fast, and they actually over time they gain out of it because they did the right thing.
And I think this really stands out for me because from everything that we've talked about and the examples that you've talked about, it seems that firstly owning up to the crisis, owning up to whatever is happening, taking responsibility for it, and then learning from it, as you mentioned in the Tylenol example,
Yeah.
taking concrete steps, learning from it and making sure that it doesn't happen again. That's
right.
critical
Yeah.
for any organization. It's
Yeah.
not just about that statement,
Yeah.
but what you do afterwards.
Yeah.
How long does this last? For example, with Optus, we've seen people still remember because of this incident that's
Yeah.
happened. People are now recalling the previous incident. What is the life cycle of things going wrong? How long do we need to keep managing those communications?
Well, usually you stumble and you get back on your feet and you move on from there. So in a normal thing where it's a one-off, you stumble, something difficult happens, you manage it really intensely for about the first 3 months. And then it's a continual management for up to 5 years, and you still don't necessarily get back to where you were in terms of your brand trust and so on. So it could take 5 years. If you stumble, get back up, stumble and get back up, and stumble and get back up again, then we're kind of in new territory in a way. Like you may need to look at the whole organization, what's going on there, what's happening with communications, what's happening with the technical aspects, what's happening with staff, and why can't they feel like, are they doing their jobs properly? Do they feel that they can't communicate it further up the line? Is it too hierarchical and too strict? Like, you ask all of those questions of an organization that is going through those multiple crises in short order. And then perhaps you get to a point where you need to actually totally restructure or just forget about it. It's a difficult one. There's a lot of work to be done in some of those corporations that just keep stumbling. A lot of work, and it can't all be done by a new CEO. Like putting a new head on the fish doesn't fix the fish after a certain point. Yeah.
Well, Seamus, very interesting conversation, but we have to probably wrap this up pretty soon. But before we wrap up, I would love to know if you have any final thoughts around, how do we deal with crisis?
Yeah, so it's just the same old thing. Be prepared, have a plan, put a team in place, and if a call comes at midnight from the media, take the call from the media. Now, you don't necessarily have to answer any questions. You can say, well, who are you? Where are you from? What's your phone number? Can you text me your email address? And can you send me a list of questions that you want answered? And then you can get your team involved in that. But don't hang up, don't run away, face up to it, but be prepared. Really, just be prepared as best you can.
Thank you so much, Seamus.
Thanks
it's been lovely having you, and some very relevant conversation given everything that's happening around us right now. So thank you for sharing your 2 cents on it.
Thank you so much, and it was lovely to talk to you. Thank you.
Same here. Thank you. From data management and product innovation to regulatory compliance, whether it's optimizing costs or enhancing efficiencies, Infinity is your partner for solving tricky problems with a human-centric and tech-powered approach. Connect with us at contact@infinity.co.